Yes.
I really wanted to have you on the show because, you know, the Quick is about those kind of connections in opera, and that opera sort of facilitates or makes happen, you know, like when, you know, it can be either between like, between us or between an audience member. But one of the connections I love that opera, when opera reaches out and connects with a particular organization or entity, is when it actually reaches out and serves the community that it's in. And we were talking the other day, and you were telling me about a project that Bergen National Opera had.
Well, this was a very special project. I've worked a lot with opera, working in communities, but it's not a very usual thing in Norway. There's generally, I mean, there are a lot of smaller companies who will hire some professional singers. They will hire players, some of them maybe a mix of amateurs or professional people to play in the orchestra, and maybe their local community will be the chorus for the opera company. But the kind of community opera I was talking about was when you really build an opera from scratch with people who have really no connection to opera whatsoever. And yes, you know, you bring in your team, and you might bring in some young singers and all kinds of things. We did a couple of projects like this in a very special place in an island in the fjord, just up from up the fjord from Bergen, in a particularly beautiful place, where there was a small island where people who were kind of halfway between leaving incarceration, leaving long prison sentences, and being rehabilitated back to live independently in the community. And there was room for about 35 of them on this island, and they lived there and they learned.
It just sounds like this, just from our listeners in America, it sounds like this is an entire island. That's what we would call a halfway house.
Yes, it is. Yeah. It's a very special halfway house, and the fact that it was an island, there was something kind of almost poetic about that, because it became very, and the guys there, instead of being perhaps on their own or sharing accommodation with one person, there were 4 or 5 large houses, and so they mixed houses. They moved in together, and they had to really, start to rebuild their sense of relationships and get their sort of emotional intelligence up and running. What was wonderful was that the wonderful woman, Hannah, who ran the island, encouraged them to grow their own vegetables, to tend the gardens, they got pigs, they even, I don't know quite why they got a llama, but they did get a llama. And they got, chickens and all kinds of things. There were terrific workshops. They were making a lot of things, particularly sort of Christmas decorations, wooden objects. And it was there, really had a good thing going there. There were a real self-sufficiency. For instance, one of the prisoners who was really, really keen on baking and cooking, he did a sort of, he learned to be a chef while he was there, and there he was feeding all his colleagues. And now, as far as I know, that he's now actually really training to be a professional chef, which is wonderful. But a lot of retraining, a lot of really equipping them in a very safe environment for the rest of their lives. We decided we wanted to, partly because of knowledge of this marvelous woman, Hannah, who was working with them, that wouldn't it be great to do an opera with them? And you can imagine the scene, all us lovies turning up.
Was it received really enthusiastically when you guys first came up with an idea for producing opera with an island full of people in a halfway house? Was that, were people like, this is a crazy idea, will never work?
The first meeting was a little strange, I have to say, because I roll up, and there are a lot of men there, not very many women at all, and there's this huge guy.
What? Mary, what? What are you saying? I can't believe it.
No, I'm sure it's very, very hard to get your head around. But anyway, there are all these big guys, lots of tattoos, and looking at, and I'm sitting in there, and I come in and say, "Hey, we're going to make an opera," and they kind of go. They look, you should see the sliding eyes. And so I talked a bit about, don't be scared. We don't really expect you to sing, but will you give this a chance? And we did a little workshop. And it was a load of fun. And anyway, it was a long journey. Of course, to begin with, nobody wanted to sing, but eventually we discovered that somebody played the guitar and somebody wanted to be a drummer. And I mean, just slowly but slowly through a whole series of workshops. And I had to say, we had a wonderful director called Johnny Ramster, who was, who looks like a punk. And he was just fantastic. He just spoke, he's exactly the same with everybody. And, we kind of built family there. We learned to trust each other. We learned the boundaries. And wonderful things happened. There was one guy there who, I don't know quite why, but one of the teachers in the school had decided that he should learn how to knit. And so in the end, we did this project. Ultimately, the performance was just before Christmas. And this guy and one or two of the teachers, they knitted covers for the seats so people wouldn't have cold back sides. So, everybody joined in their own way. And our lovely, wonderful costume director did, a lot of them very understandably didn't want to show their faces. So she did some fantastic mask workshops with them. Highly relevant, I should say, perhaps at the moment, although a different kind of mask.
Yeah.
And they did wonderful things. They were sort of real Dame Edna stuff with lots of sequins and all kinds of wonderful things. In the end, people did join in and sing, which was great. But they put up this big insulated tent for us. They built the set. They made the props. Lots of
these are all the people that were part of the program. Everybody were being rehabilitated. They were using all of their alternative skills like knitting or building or whatever. They were using those to help you guys put on this show for them.
They really, really were. And I think in the end, every single person on that island, staff and inmates, took part in some way. There was one person who was really, really very shy, and it would have been horrible to push them. But, they became a kind of cheerleader in the audience. Now, the opera we chose was written by, it's a book I used to read to my kids by a Canadian writer called Michael Munch. And it's a story called The Paper Bag Princess. And basically it's a prince, a princess, and a dragon. Mm-hmm. The princess is, loves her fancy clothes. She's a smashing girl. The prince is a little bit of an idiot, really. He likes to play tennis. He's very, very proud of himself. And the dragon was indeed a dragon. But the prince and princess are about to get married. They're living in this wonderful castle, and along comes the dragon and burns the castle down and captures the prince. Now, our princess actually turns out to be quite a feisty young lady. And so she says, I'm going to go and find my prince and bring him back. So, but she has absolutely no clothes. So the princess is rescuing the prince this time. Yeah. I tell you,
that nice.
There's a lot of strange things in this story.
Yeah.
But so the only thing the princess can find to wear is a great big paper bag. So she puts on the big paper bag. There you have your paper bag princess. Mm-hmm. And she finds some wood and she makes herself a big sword and off she goes to rescue her prince. She gets to the castle and there's the dragon, and the dragon blows lots of fire and says, "Go away, you silly girl." And she stands her ground and says, "Dragon, I'm going to get in and I'm going to have my prince back." And he says, "Nonsense." And eventually she says, "Ooh, you're so big and strong. I bet you can't run around the world in 10 seconds. And of course, the dragon is a little susceptible to flattery. So the dragon says, "What do you mean? Of course I can." So he rushes around the world in 10 seconds. And she says, "Wow, bet that was a fluke. Do it again." So gradually, of course, she absolutely exhausts the dragon and the dragon falls asleep. So she goes in and she finds the prince, and the prince takes one look at her and he says, "My God, what are you wearing? And your hair is filthy. You're supposed to look like a princess." And the princess puffs herself out in her paper bag and pushes back her hair and says, "Prince, I think you're a jerk and I'm not going to marry you after all." So a very feminist story.
It's a good story. I like it.
But it's a wonderful story in that it's not got very many words and it's got lots of pictures. So it left lots of room for the music. Right. And what we did was Stevie Higgins, who was the music director.
Oh, Stevie.
You know Stevie, of course. You could work with him. a wonderful guy, wonderful man. He arranged a whole set of Handel arias. So when the princess or the prince or the dragon sang, they sang a Handel aria with new Norwegian words that fitted into the story. And the chorus, which was a mix of some of our young singers, some of the prisoners, some of the staff, everybody on the island, everything they sang was Norwegian folk music. And it was the most extraordinary, it really was the most extraordinary mix. And
well, that's really, I mean, it's, you know, one of the things that we work on in America a lot in our thing is accessibility and trying to find ways to make what we do something that, you know, regular folks can get on board with. And what I really love about this is that you have like this whole team of people that, you know, are in society, and you have these other folks that have been sort of pushed out of society for one reason or another. But you guys are all working together. And so the people that were kind of, you know, shunned from society now no longer feel that way. And they're able to sort of invest work with these other folks, and the otherness of how we view, you know, all things, but especially when we talk about people who have been incarcerated, this otherness sort of, you used opera to sort of help remove that hedge between these two groups. So the otherness didn't exist. Did you notice that that was sort of happening along the way, where the prisoners and the people that were working that were like, oh, we're all the same now? Like kind of an inflection point.
I think that was, you know, that became very evident. It was, you know, we made it, you know, it's easy to say, you know, we're all equal in this. We're all, you know, everybody's got exactly the same status. As
very easy to say, yes.
Very easy to say, but you have to prove that. And I think we really, really did prove that. And, you know, and wonderful things happened afterwards. One of the guys came and worked with us in the costume department on the next production we were doing. And a lot of wonderful things happened. But for me, coming, you know, the quick actually was, we did these performances just before Christmas. And it was wonderful. All the audience who came got fed, and all the kids got just taken to see the animals. And, you know, it was just an extraordinary experience. But when we were all waiting to get the boat home, it was black dark. And, you know, it's actually extraordinarily beautiful in that environment. So, you know, you've got all these twinkly lights, the little boat coming to fetch us. And every single person who'd been involved in the opera came down to the pier, to the jetty, to see us off in the boat. And suddenly everybody just started to sing.
My God.
And, you know, we were all, it makes me shiver actually right now. My knees are shaking just thinking about it. Just everybody started to sing. And there we were, you know, in the boat. And I mean, it was, you know, it was just one of the really, really great moments. We were all together, absolutely all together.
It makes me think of communion, doesn't it? It feels like a bit like communion. And like that was sort of the benediction on your moment there. That's just
I think for everybody, it was such a precious thing, and I'll treasure it for the rest of my life. I really, really will.
It's funny, like it's these kind of moments that always make me think, you know, I would do this job for $100 and a biscuit. You know, I love it. And but it's not the money that I love, and it's not the adulation, and it's not all that stuff. You know, a lot of times that's a hedge to the enjoyment, frankly. It's moments like this.
Well, it's this absolutely pure communication when all the rubbish has gone away, and you're just together, and you're all experiencing the same thing. It's such an incredibly precious thing.
When did you notice like the sort of the inflection point where I come from austere beginnings, and what's interesting about sort of my journey and going through opera is that, because my family and my people are super supportive, they're always going to come whether they want to or not,
Yeah.
because they want to support me and they know me. But what's funny about that it's sort of this funny bait and switch, because they come to see me, but they end up enjoying the show. And then I have so many folks in my family like, I go to opera now because I go, it's interesting to me. And so
it's a funny one.
Where was that inflection point for you guys when you saw the prisoners and the staff and everybody going, and these fancy opera folks coming down from their ivory tower to help us? When was that sort of like domino effect, that inflection point where everything changed?
It sort of steadily, it was a sort of steady journey, but I think when that great big tent arrived and they were going to put it up, there was, I think at that point there was kind of, hey, this is real, we're going to do this. And I maybe that was, but the tipping point, I'm not sure. There was definitely a kind of frisson of excitement there. Yeah. But I think that I noticed it one day. We were out there doing workshops, and everybody stopped for lunch, and everybody, the guys, all the inmates were, everybody was having lunch, and I went in, and somebody just moved pushed a chair in front of me, and I thought, right, okay, fine, we're all buddies now, I'm allowed to sit at the lunch table, and it was just the same for everybody. And
for incarcerated folks, that's a big deal, if you can sit at the table.
Yeah,
that's a big deal.
But I think at that point I realized at that point, okay, we're doing this. We're all just doing this, Yeah.
Well, when I was listening to you talk about the masks earlier, there is something to be said about rehabilitative programs like this that do allow these folks that have been othered so much to sort of put on a mask of some sort, to not have to be, constantly defined by their worst act, but in this moment, I mean, this is about opera. Of course, these people could be a character, and that's great. And we all understand as professionals, actors, what that does for us. But I mean, just in a general concept, you have people doing, knitting handicrafts, people putting up the tent, all these other things, that are investing these folks in and allowing them for a moment not to be the other, not to be the guy that broke the law, not to be the woman that broke the law, but just part of a community where no one cares about your past.
I do really take my hat off to Hannah, who was running that island. I mean, I think that what she engendered there, very sadly now the government took away, eventually, last year took the funding away, because as you can imagine, that running that kind of enterprise is not exactly cost effective. But so unfortunately it's been closed. But I do think what she did there was quite extraordinary in that she made everything, she sort of turned everything, I mean, she was very disciplined and very tough, but she sort of somehow turned everything into a kind of positive experience. And by bringing in kind of normal rural life, so to speak, she embedded something that was nothing, not judgmental in any way, and was very, very much positive, very kind of trust building. And I mean, I greatly admire what she did, actually, I really do. I'd like to introduce Hannah Frostad, who worked with us on a very wonderful project on an island, which was a halfway house for prisoners leaving jail and moving on to live independently. And she has a very, very important role on that island and created the most extraordinary situation where we were very lucky enough to go and perform an opera, which we built with everybody who lived on the island. And without Hannah, it absolutely could not have happened. So I really wanted her to have a chance to talk to you as well today.
So Hannah, what was it like when you heard from Bergen National Opera and they decided that they wanted to bring opera to your island? and sort of help these folks, give them some artistic, creative outlets. What was your reaction when you heard that?
Well, it was not actually so that happening. We were talking together. We were together and talking together, and
we had been working together on a very wonderful little glamping festival up in the fjords with food and opera.
What?
And Hannah's had long had.
Wait, come on now. That's really interesting too.
Yeah, it was quite unusual.
Glamping and opera?
Yeah, it was great. Well, I was thinking about what's the fantastic glamping festival? I can't remember what it's called. It's in California. Mm-hmm. And there are a number, of course, in the UK, not in Scotland where I come from, where the weather isn't really good enough, but certainly there are in the south of England. There's some very famous festivals like Latitude. Obviously, oh God, help me out here, Hannah, you can't remember.
Well, so that sort of inspired this whole sort of tent idea, huh?
We were in the pub one night, and Hannah wasn't there, in fact, but we had been probably drinking too much wine, and suddenly the idea of doing a glamping festival up in the fjords seemed like a brilliant one. So Hannah who's done a huge championship of food production, Norwegian food production, craft cheesemakers, meat producers, and craft in general, has had a massive influence on that in Norway. So we were very fortunate that she was in charge of the food and the wonderful kind of farmers market that we had at that festival. So during one of these long white nights in the summer in Norway, we kind of fell into conversation about how we could maybe do something on the island.
You took this idea that you guys had sort of done as a sort of whim or this glamping idea, and you took it and sort of turned it to something that's more service oriented. Is that what I'm?
Yes, but it was like I usually ask people, "Have you done that in prison before?" Since I was working in the prison, so I asked, "Have you had opera in prison?" No, they
not in Norway, certainly no.
And then it just started rolling, and
but it was, I think, the sum of the parts just. I mean, it was just extraordinary. If we added 2 and 2 together and got about 473, I think, really. It was it was just fantastic. But Hannah, how did you get to be working in Ulvsnesøy in the first place?
Oh, I have had contact with the prison for 20 years, I think, because I had one apprentice in my work for 20 years ago. And then I've been having classes in prison, food classes. And when I closed down my restaurant, I was in the kitchen at Ulvsnesøy for 2 months, the year before I started it. And then I said, no, I don't want to work here in the kitchen. So then I just went around and did other things. And then they called me and asked, do you want to come back to Ulvsnesøy and be in charge of manager of the island? And then
so it wasn't just your island in the rehabilitation projects that you guys were engaged in. It's not just performances, it's cooking, it's raising animals, it's farming, it's all of these things. So it really is kind of a holistic approach to rehab.
It's a tiny little island.
Tiny little prison island.
Yeah.
Don't think of Alcatraz. It's nothing like that.
No sharks in the water, huh? Just
no sharks in water. So it was a lot of things going on.
So can you tell me about what was it like for these folks that were on this island, incarcerated? What was it like for them the first day a bunch of opera singers showed up and said, hey guys, let's do an opera. What do you think about that?
Well, I think in the beginning they were very skeptical.
I would be. I would be too.
Why an opera? Why can't we just have a rock concert?
Yeah, rock metal. I mean, Norway, you guys dig some metal, right? So I mean, that would be my first impulse.
Yeah. No, so we had to introduce them and introduce Mary, and she came, and we had everybody to listen, and I also, so we really, and I went around to all the inmates, and I said, hello, I think I've heard that you have been singing before. Yes, I once. Okay, you are in the opera. And I went to another, and I said, oh, I heard you're playing the guitar. Yes, I started 2 months ago. Oh, you are in the opera. So I went around to everybody, the inmates and the employer, and asked them, or demand them.
I guess they're incarcerated. You can't really.
It wasn't just the guys who were sort of residents there. It was I think some of the staff were. I can remember one particular person who were sort of very worried about this. I remember we went back on the train to Bergen together, and I could see he was kind of looking at me as though I was crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, as an opera singer, I think it's, having a captive audience is one of our favorite, our most favorite things. So, having these folks here that really, they really didn't have a choice. They're there. And is there something about, having to do something that was so out of their comfort zone, that was so different and so unfamiliar to them? Was there a point along the journey that you started to see the lights come on and in particular individuals, and then where was that inflection point where you really felt everybody come along with you, and the staff and the opera and the incarcerated folks?
Close to the end.
I think it was when the tent arrived, and
it was because I really had been working with everybody, and we have the classes, the singing and stuff, but I think it was almost 2-3 weeks before we had the tent coming, and everybody had their
work to do, their special task. Yes,
the special task, and I think when the tent arrived, they know it was the point of no return. So, and everybody just
Mary, doesn't it remind you of the beginning of Pagliacci?
Oh, yes.
They're here. In English, of course. But so it sounds like, the troupe coming into town and setting up. And, for us as performers, one of the most exciting parts of every experience whenever you go into a new project is that first production meeting, or that first step into the hall where you see everything set up and the sets there and the costumes, and these sort of moments that we really kind of take for granted as performers. It must have been really interesting to watch these folks that are really unacquainted with those experiences, to see them for the first time. That first time to see the set, that first time to see the tent coming up, the first time that you had a Sitzprobe. It must have been really amazing to watch that.
I think also, just seeing all the people arrive, which isn't such a usual thing. Suddenly there's all these people arriving, and I think the sense of the excitement was, certainly for me, the excitement was fantastic. Hannah, talk a little bit about, how you got the animals and how you started all that, because that was, if you've been sitting incarcerated in a small space for a long time, and suddenly there's this island and you're growing your own food and you're planting the garden. How did that begin?
When I came to the island, they already had sheep.
They did?
Yes,
Okay.
Yes. So, but I just went on and said, well, we have sheep, we have chickens, so we need to have bees, and we need to have pigs, and we need to have alpaca.
Yeah, you didn't really need to have an alpaca, but the alpaca was very charming, I have to say.
Yeah, they're great mascots.
So,
did you get any wool from that alpaca?
Yes, we did.
Did you?
Yeah.
Wow. So people are walking around wearing jumpers from that alpaca on Ulvsnesøy. That's amazing. Oh, my word.
What a legacy. Well, you know, it strikes me, one of the most interesting things, and I've been, you know, Mary and I talked about this a couple of days ago. And one of the really interesting things that sort of popped into my mind was the fact that we, you know, with, you know, I do an opera called Dead Man Walking, which is about about a murder and a murderer who goes to death row in America, and who is helped make his transition by Sister Helen, a nun who serves as his spiritual advisor. And so I'm sort of well acquainted with sort of prison life and just from a research standpoint. And one of the things, you know, when I'm talking to people that have been formerly incarcerated, you know, when I was in Eugene, Oregon, I was doing Dead Man Walking, and a young man came up to me and he said, you know, you could see that he wasn't acquainted with speaking to people, you know, strangers or whatever, or people from the stage or whatever. And he was very nervous, and he was kind of hemming and hawing. And, you know, he was part of this group of formerly incarcerated individuals who had come, as, you know, similar to what the kind of thing that you guys are doing, is sort of exposing and people to art and trying to get them involved. And so we had a special sort of like session for them to come talk to us. And this young man, I think he was about 24 years old. He'd spent about 3 years in prison for, he didn't say what, but when we're sitting there, you know, he kind of stays in the back, and he's very bashful, and he doesn't want to say anything. And he finally, when the crowd, you know, disperses, he walks up to me and kind of says, Mr. Mays, you know, I just want to say how much I appreciate everything that you guys are doing here, because, and he just stops and he can't talk, and he starts getting very emotional, and he's crying, and he just sort of like lets this whole wall of emotion like crash over him. And he's like, nobody understands what it's like for us. Nobody understands. It's the worst thing I've ever experienced in my life. I was locked away. I didn't have any family. I was completely alone. And when you were walking around in that jail cell like a caged animal, I understood what that meant. And I understood seeing my story, and so it struck me, you know, I was talking to Mary, and I just, you know, we hung up, and I thought about that guy immediately, because there's all these folks that we want to define by their worst act, and we sort of put them away, and we separate them from society. And so we want them, what we do is we don't want to see them. We want them to go away, and we don't want them to be seen, and we want them to go away. This is at least from American perspective. And for me, I think it was, you know, it's the beauty of this project is that by doing this, people were lining up to see them. People were lining up to sit down, to watch them express themselves, you know, and that is something that really struck me. Like I couldn't think of a more productive way to turn opera and art to a better use than this. I mean, it was, you know, it struck me that way. What do you guys, does that leave any impression with you, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was this fantastic feeling that we were all together. None of us were any different from each other. There was no discrimination, you know, you're here and I'm leaving to go home. There was this kind of feeling that we were all, you know, we were all nervous, we were all doing something new, we were all trying to do something together. And that, for me, I think was
well, doesn't when you're working with people like that close on something that huge of an undertaking, you don't have time to other people.
No.
You can't say they're other, you know, because you have to work so close. And I think that's beautiful. That
we really, there was this, we really were together. But I mean, I think also that was so much about how much they trusted you, Hannah. You know, I think you never, you know, in the leadership role there, you never kind of stood above other people. And I'm sure at times, you know, that's hard because, you know, things happen, incidents happen, bad things happen, and hard decisions had to be made. But I think everybody on that island had that, you know, had the most fantastic respect for you. And that made a huge difference to working with the project. I really do think that.
Were there, I mean, you know, we love to, we talk about these projects when we're, you know, artists, and we always talk about, oh, this, it was so, what a wonderful thing. It was so great. And we had all this, but you know, anytime you do something like this, there's some tremendous challenges that you must have had to overcome. Can you talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you had and what you did to overcome those and to get to your goal?
It was a lot of challenge. It was from practical, from the boat broke down 2 days before the opera, and we had to fix it and get a diver and stuff like that. And
wow.
And when
a
we
diver.
to get the,
Wow.
And when the tent arrived, and I slept on the island because I want to be there the whole week.
Yeah.
And in the morning it had moved because it was too much wind. So it was. So, but the inmates, they had take charge themselves and went out and fixed it. So
I have to say,
they just did everything.
Doing an outdoor opera just before Christmas in Norway is a challenge in itself. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Does it get a little chilly around Christmas time in Norway?
It's cold.
Cold and windy, but it was beautiful, actually, just beautiful. It's such a beautiful place.
Yeah.
It was breathtakingly.
Yeah.
Who was it we had on that? Oh, it was Johnny, the director. The first time he came, you know, this is a guy who lives in East London or something, and his usual commute is a walk and a bus and the underground. He's standing at the front of this boat looking up, you know, this exquisitely lovely fjord, you know, and the little boat putting over to the island, which has got twinkly lights. So, yeah, I think I'll change my commute.
I can tell you this much. I have never been in a place where the beauty was so aggressive. I mean, Bergen's beauty is kind of pushy, you know? It's like, it's so gorgeous. Every day you walk outside and you're like, enough already.
Yes.
Is it always this gorgeous? Come on. You know?
It is.
Well, I must say, last night I was writing a very boring report, and I suddenly looked out of the window and everything was kind of monochrome, but the Ulvsnesøy and the mountain ahead was this color of kind of like a kind of baked peach color. Yeah. And I nearly fell off my seat. It was just.
It does that. Like you'll see that the mountain will be just this beautiful sunlit and everything else is dark. It's unbelievable. Can you, just as we sort of wrap up here, can you,
I can say
are there any
challenge?
Absolutely, please.
Yeah, we had one of the inmates who was supposed. He's a musician.
He's a rapper.
He's a rapper. Yeah, and he was supposed to make a piece himself, and he was one of the main.
Yeah, he was one of the main characters in the opera.
Yes.
Until.
Well, and then he was moved from the island, and we had to get him back to the island for doing the opera. And he came, and that was 2 days before because we should have testing. And then it has become new inmates in other parts of the role, and he was. I don't go on the scene if that guy is on the scene because he has done things that I don't like.
So it's just like opera, just like real opera.
I know.
Absolutely like real opera.
We had a diva. That's true.
That's amazing. They're everywhere.
And I went to the guards, and I had to discuss it with somebody, and they say just take away the other guys because you're only 2 days left. And I felt no, that's not right. And I went to. One of your, producenten.
Marty, was it helping Marty?
Yeah,
maybe.
And I was just talking, and this is opera. This always happens, so we fixed it. So, and then I just went to the guy and I said, "Take your clothes, and I take you back to your where you live." And then next morning, I went to one of the employer I work with, and I said, hello. I know you can sing. Please. No. Yes.
Yeah. She was fantastic.
And she did.
I love it.
She was just fun. I never forget. She had this big boa feather, and she got on, this kind of shy woman. Oh no, I couldn't do this. I couldn't do this. She got on stage, and whoa, there she was. Just fantastic.
And it was so, yeah, it was
so
great.
Hanna got a little taste of what it is like to be an opera impresario, didn't she? She like had to speak to the guards, which would be, I guess, HR. Like, we got to get rid of this guy and say he's such a
I took him home. I was furious. I was like, we go. And I took him home, drive him home to the other place. And we are not supposed to go alone with the prisoner.
Just
I did.
done.
But he was, yeah.
Oh dear.
That's great. I love it. I mean, that's real talk. That's truth,
Yeah.
because we tend to do it with, especially anytime that we're doing something with sort of disenfranchised groups or groups that are a little bit, that have had some challenges, like the incarcerated folks. We tend to talk about all the good stuff, and it's so kind and so wonderful and so beautiful. And like hearing some of the challenges and the miscues and the Devo prisoner, it's just wonderful. So I love hearing that. And that takes me to my next sort of question is when you go through this with all these people, are there any folks that really stuck out in your mind that you thought they got a real benefit from this experience?
Yes,
or do you do you actually keep in contact with any of these folks?
Yes, I do. And they always, when I meet them again, if occasionally or whatever, they always talk about the opera.
Do they?
Always.
I don't know that.
It was the most fantastic,
fantastic. How wonderful
thing they ever experienced.
Me, well, I'm with them on that, because it was one of the most wonderful things I've ever experienced too. So.
And I think it was one of the big moments was also the last song we sing, because it was a song that was about the island, and we stood there together, employer, inmates, and opera singers, and it was a song about we love our island, we love the prison, and
it was beautiful.
And even the director,
the main governor of the main prison here, he was there.
Because I got him into the choir too. I just called, you are in the choir.
Mary, I mean, I don't want to overstep, but I don't know if there's any openings for Hanna, but she sounds like she's one heck of a casting agent. She's tough.
I have plans.
Well, I want to thank you all for stopping by on this show. It's been such a joy to talk to you about this project.
Oh, what a joy!
And it's a testament to your community and to your country that something like this had happened. And man, this inspires me to do something similar or something like that in the States. And I think that a lot of folks will take a lot of inspiration from this story. And I want to thank you so much for not just for coming on the show, but just for giving of yourself the way you do, and for dedicating yourself to helping others. I think that's just,
well,
wonderful.
We're very lucky people, but we're also very lucky that there are singers around like you, Mike, because not everybody's like you. You are one of a kind.
Well, I'm just a good old boy from East Texas who fell into this thing accidentally.
No.
I used to be my grandfather was a preacher, and
That was mine, funnily enough.
Yeah, he was a fire and brimstone missionary Baptist.
Oh no,
preacher.
Mine was very quiet.
Yeah, my that's where I got the voice from. Screaming in the pulpit with their.
Oh, I see. Yes.
But
I didn't. The hand movements from. That Bible.
That's right. You just beat it. But I lost the fundamentalist religion, but I didn't lose the evangelism, and I just applied it to opera. And I think that there's a lot of places in this world where opera can be used to serve and to help people. And I think that's should be our goal in this art form, is always to serve the communities in which we are producing our art. So, and just like what you have done here. So thank you so much. And thank you for showing us exactly the essence of what the Quick is. I mean, I can't imagine. I know that when you talk about what it when we go to help people, we often end up helping ourselves, you know?
Yeah.
And
there was certainly an element of that. My goodness.
Boy, and when you said it changed you, right?
Mm.
Isn't that, I mean, that's what I call opera with a conscience, right?
Mm.
It's opera that is it. I don't mean like an opera, but just opera itself as a tool to serve the community that where it's produced. You know,
I think it's terribly important that we make opera useful.
It should be a service, yes.
You know, and one of the things that I'm finding fascinating right now in this very peculiar situation where none of us can perform, so to speak, is, you know, how this, in many senses, I think that it's given us all a huge kick up the backside to actually, you know, to grow actually, and also to, you know, to look into the world we don't know, you know, to really use our curiosity and our creativity and think in different ways. And whatever the outcome, you know, I think when we all get back into the theatre, I think it will be different. And I think that's a very good thing. I mean, I think there is, you know, we're always accused of museum culture and all this kind of stuff. And you know, there's nothing wrong with museums, but yes, thank you. I'm with you. But I mean, we can't just kind of sit, you know, I mean, I've always believed profoundly that you can't sort of sit in an organization and wait for the audience to come to you. But, you know, I think this is, you know, I mean, we have obviously, all of us are on a kind of roller coaster at the moment going through this very strange time with the virus, but it's a fantastic opportunity on a good day. Really fantastic. And actually, you guys should be proud because Opera America put out a very good statement the other day saying, you know, we're not curators of the past, you know, the future is our responsibility. It was a very strong, imaginative, and I thought, yeah, well done you. But I think we have to see it this way, but it's difficult. You know, I felt in the last, you know, when we sort of, you know, everything started to close down and, you know, it's tough because people generally don't like change. And I felt a bit like Sisyphus and his boulder, you know, pushing that boulder up hill. And people were saying, you know, when we get back to our proper jobs and you know, I was hearing these kind of things from people and, you know, I mean, isn't this a fantastic opportunity to redefine our jobs?
We finally get to cast off the chains of tradition.
Mm.
Have to.
Yes, have to. I mean, probably make.
And it's things like this project that we have to do. Because if opera is just for the people at the very top of the economic system, well, when the economic system fails, we're not going to be around.
No, that's for sure.
And opera has always been, I know that it's not the current marketing that for the past 50 years has been operas for rich people. Look at this cool Rolex ad.
Yeah.
But
My God,
that can't be our future.
No, it really, really can't. And it's going to be very interesting because I think the little companies, you know, the little flexible companies are absolutely going to come into their own. I really do. I mean, I think they're really going to push the big companies. They're going to push the envelope. And I think some really fantastic things might happen. And I think, you know, we'd be very foolish not to pay attention to them and not to you know, I mean, it's just really important. And I mean, it sounds awful and preachy and kind of virtue signaling, but I mean, I think we have to seize this opportunity and just see what we can do, you know, and share it with. There's also the other thing about, I think, you know, that some of these digital projects and a lot of the collaborative stuff that's happening is that it's really an opportunity also to build community, community with a small c. And I think, you know, I don't know, I think however scary it is, because it is really scary, and of course financially it's a nightmare for so many people, but I think setting the money aside, which is all very well, you know, I think we've got to be brave and kind of, you know, feel the fear and do it anyway, as the book says, you know.
Well, you know what I've said to a lot of folks in a lot of these because I'm doing these conversations like, you know, 3-4 times a day sometimes. Yeah. And, you know, truly, like you said two things that really, I mean, I was like, the monkey inside my head was doing backflips because you said the small companies, we should look to them for leadership because they know how to adjust. Because it's a whole hell of a lot easier to turn a lifeboat than it is to turn the Titanic.
Yes, and look what happened to the Titanic.
And look what happened to the Titanic, that big, fancy, beautiful, opulent testament to excess is at the bottom of the ocean. Yeah. And I think that if we keep going down, if we keep looking in the rearview mirror and wanting to go back and make opera great again, it's going to end up at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean.
I fear it may.
So if we get down there, if we get down and look to those people that understand what austerity means, that understands what to do with $100,000 budget and a $200,000 budget instead of a $15 million budget.
Yeah.
Those people, they're the ones that you see right now that aren't curled up in a corner, rocking themselves to sleep every night, muttering to themselves about, oh my God, what's happening? The people that have lived through austere times, you know, that came up the hard way, you know, with their careers, working at, you know, for nothing, elbow grease and exposure bucks. Those folks right now are out there working, doing stuff, making changes.
They're out there working, and they're getting a lot of, you know, we'll bang on about old, you know, the age of the audience and all that. But I mean, it's, you know, there are a lot of people, young people out there doing adventurous things and making opera hot, you know?
Yeah.
It's great.
Man, I know everyone, you know, my age and older. Like, I remember when I was 28, I remember what I wanted to do. And I remember getting so frustrated that I was being restrained.
Yep.
I didn't want to be restrained. I wanted to do what I want. And when I'm telling young singers today, when I talk to them and they're like, well, what do we do? And I'm like, don't ask me. I'm too old.
Come down, Michael.
Ask your friends. I mean, but I'm 44. I mean, you know, if you're over 35, you're out of that demographic. So I'm like, ask those people what to do.
Yeah. Yep.
Because we're past it. Once we start doing it, it's lame.
Yeah. Well, not in your case for sure. But I think one of the things that really is exciting is this kind of whole new raft of younger directors coming in. You know, who've got very different ideas, and you know, they're not, you know, they will do something traditional but they will really make choices. I mean, and it's knocking out that, you know, the whole very German regie thing, which is, you know, so about, in many cases about, I mean, of course there are many interesting things, but there's also an awful lot that's about directors' egos. But I think there's this whole raft of younger directors who are sort of somehow managing to have kind of absorbed all that and are really, really doing interesting and relevant things, and making back to making opera useful and making it topical without, you know, banging people over the head with you know, a rod. You know,
you don't have to talk down to people and insult them. You know,
no,
I mean,
no,
like, you know, we always talk in America about Euro trash, trash productions, and I know what that means. But after having gone to Europe and seen some, and then, you know, brushed up on all the history that I didn't learn in public school in America, I understood that, you know, opera in 1925 in Germany looked a lot different than opera in 1945, in 1965, in 1985. Sure. Do you know why that is? Because they went through 2 world wars on their own turf. That will change the way you interpret art. And I think that if I had gone through that, I would not want to go to a Renaissance fair opera. No. I would want something else that said something more than pretty pictures and nice music. Yeah,
something that something fresh and absolutely.
And so when I say that, I compare it to this pandemic, opera in 2019. What we saw in 2019, that's gone forever, done. Yeah. Pasta così.
Yes. Absolutely.
So from this moment on, we got to be working on what we should be doing. Yes. Community service, I think, is the sweet spot.
Yep, I think that it's you know, because there's a lot. I mean, you know, when I was still a violinist and in the Scottish Chamber Orchestra that I played in was one of the orchestras that were sort of first through the gate in terms of education projects. And it was interesting to see what happened. We were terribly pleased with ourselves, and we did all sorts of stuff and work with kids and all kinds of things. And then I suddenly realized that, you know, we would do these projects and I remember I did a project with a whole lot of primary school kids. We made an opera called School Dinners, and we just used all the cutlery and banging the tables and all this kind of thing. And I thought that was absolutely, you know, we had a lovely time, and it was a load of fun, and the teachers were terrified. But then, the next night you're sitting on the platform playing a Beethoven symphony. And I was just thinking, how does that relate to that somehow? And these two things sort of seem to go along in parallel lines. And maybe we're getting better at that. Maybe we're getting better about bringing that together. There are a lot of very clever people out there working in the education world. So, maybe, I just think it's an exciting time. And as I say, this year has changed everything. And while that is, I find that profoundly scary, I think we have no option but to find it exciting.
Somebody asked me today, what I thought about this, and I must be so devastated. It must be so terrible to be an artist right now. And I was like, well, yeah, I miss the money and I miss doing it. But that ain't it, man.
No.
That's not what I miss. What I want to do is create again.
Yeah.
I want to make art again.
Yeah, absolutely. Good. Michael, do we just have one? Because I have another quick moment, and it actually involves you. Have we got a minute to talk about
Absolutely.
that?
Absolutely.
When you came to do Sweeney Todd with us, it was, I'm talking about being scary. We had never done a musical before. And of course, there was a lot of kind of, oh my God, what is this? You're an opera company. What are you doing? And then I sat in that house, and I don't think, was it the premiere? I think it was the second night. And for me, there was a profound moment which I won't ever forget, which is, the bit, is at the end of Act 1 or Act 2, when Sweeney actually stopped, from being a very damaged, bitter, inward man, you see him actually, he comes to the front of the stage with the knife, and you have that huge eye.
It's the epiphany.
And some of the old ladies who liked to sit near the front were so scared they moved 4 rows back for the second half. But there was a moment then when you, I think it was in the second night, and you led a wonderful cast, and it's a role that it could have been written for you, but there was a moment there where, and it was very, very seriously frightening, when you sang that transformation, so to speak, and you stood right at the front of that stage, and you had a knife, and the act ended, and there was a sort of catharsis in the hall that you had communicated something horrible about, but nevertheless, it absolutely held the audience. People really, really believed that moment. And for me, I just want to say that was really, for me, one of one of the most extraordinary moments for me in a performance. And I'm not saying this to be flattered, but I was absolutely riveted. I couldn't move. And I was so aware of that feeling being throughout the audience. And there was a terrific silence. And then you could kind of, you could hear the exhalation. And, for me, it was a moment when, a singer has absolutely held the hall because they're utterly, utterly authentic. They're not playing somebody's part. They're not, pretending to be somebody. They're right in it. And it was great. I was very, very moved. I was terrified, actually. So thank you.
Thank you. That was a good memory. I miss all you guys so much, man. Like, yeah, I can tell you that, like, I do those kinds of moments and those things. That is my lifeblood. I try to get that in everything I do.
Yeah.
But so much of that, depends on the support staff and the director and the costume designers and the set designers and the administrators, everybody. When you have the kind of support and you have the yes and from everybody you're talking to, then you can do, like, you feel that and when the audience too is there, if you can open yourself up and tap into that energy, man, that's the thing I miss. That is what I want to go back to. That's the only thing I look back and go, I want to do that again. It's just that. Everything else, the flights, the hotel rooms, the big fancy fucking stages, the expensive gold-plated set pieces and costumes.
That's not what it's about.
Don't eat it. I could do Sweeney Todd in that hall in t-shirts and jeans with nothing.
Well, with our budget,
still be good.
With our budget, Michael, you pretty much had to.
Man, you guys know how to turn a silk purse sounds into a silk purse, though, boy. Because I tell you, y'all, that was riveting. I mean, and I didn't get to see it. You know, I was on it, but just being in the middle of it was just like, man, this is metal.
Yeah,
you know? It was so metal.
But it's also, you know, I have this kind of, I'm fairly boring on this topic, but people who aren't telling their own stories, you can spot it on a stage for 500 meters, you know, when somebody's, oh, these are the ornaments, or these are the ornaments that Cecilia did, or, you know, or this is how, you know, I think Rennie Fleming sings this. But, you know, it's people, you know, who really, really tell their own story. You know, it's that's where the electricity is.
Do you know, like, one of the most compelling storytellers from my culture, my particular cultural perspective and landscape is Andy Griffith.
Oh,
right. You know, well, he was a brilliant actor, by the way. He was a Broadway actor and all this stuff. He had a huge resume before he landed those great TV jobs. And when he was young, he had these albums where he would retell Shakespeare story, like Romeo and Juliet,
wow,
Hamlet, and they are hysterical.
Yes.
And so engaging. And you're on he's such a great storyteller, right? And you're on it, even though you know it's Romeo and Juliet, you're on the edge of your seat because you want to, it's not that you want to know if Romeo and Juliet still die at the end. You know that story. It's how you're like, I want to hear how Andy Griffith tells his story.
Yeah.
And for me, that's the nature of what we do. I don't want to go see somebody do a Renee Fleming impersonation.
No.
I want to see what, you know, Becky Rogers has to say about, you know, Thais, you know?
It's an extraordinary thing. It's just something, you know, I mean, you can sort of tell it when, you know, when somebody walks in at the door. I just think it's such a special, I don't know. I mean, I find that, you know, I go to a lot of auditions, as you can imagine. And you know, the minute that kid comes in her high heels and the funny dress and starts to introduce herself, you think, you know, go back off, come back on and be you know?
Yeah.
And of course it's nerves and all kinds of things, but sometimes, you know, it's even those, I don't quite know how to express this, but even, you know, through the nerves, you see more of the real person in a way. But
well, you know, so much of what we're taught as a young people coming up is homogeneity. They want to homogenize everything. You know, you have to wear this suit with this color tie and all this stuff, haircut a certain way. And when I got out of that
stuff,
that level of hell that I was in, because it is as a kind of hell, you know, I discovered that, it wasn't that I wasn't the same enough. I wasn't distinct enough. I needed to be distinct.
Yeah.
That's why I buy a Bryn Terfel's recording of Songs to Travel.
Yes.
Not because I love the Songs to Travel.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're good. They're good songs. They're not great. They're good songs. But they're great songs when Bryn Terfel sings them. You know, they're incredible songs when Bryn Terfel sings them. And that's why his uniqueness and his distinction is why he is who he is. And if there's someone comes along that is the next Bryn Terfel, I just don't care.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's also, you know, it happens in orchestral players. I mean, there's a whole generation of flute players who, you know, carry the legacy of James Galway's vibrato and kind of, you know, I mean, it's just kind of crazy. But anyway, I don't know. I think, I mean, it's interesting. We've been talking a lot recently about, you know, about vocal teaching and also singing teaching in Norway and you know, and kind of what, you know, what do you really need to know as a student? And I think that thing about authenticity, about absolutely playing your own truth, singing your own truth, probably is maybe the best thing. I mean, obviously you have to teach people technique, but I think the next best thing is to teach them to use that technique to be themselves.
Well, if you look at any other form of commercial music in the country today, in the world today, the people that are the most successful are the people that are most themselves, or at least a version of themselves that is the most distinct from all the other people. You know, and we've been in classical music, it's all, you know, black suits and white shirts, bow ties, and, you know, be very square, fit in a box. But that's the reason why classical music, I think has suffered so. Because we're trying to run towards the ivory tower. And I think when we get there, it's going to be a big pile of white rubble. And we should take those rocks and build a new theater for the people.
Yep.
You know?
Well, we're the big plans to build a new theater here in Bergen. And as you can imagine, I've been pretty mouthy about it, but interesting. Cool.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, listen, Mary, it has been so wonderful to see you and speak to you. Like right now I'm on a high. I want to go outside and work in my garden and get all happy because, you know, when I speak to people throughout this crisis, and even before this, you know, opera was always going to die. You know, you talk to like some of the most powerful people in our world that ostensibly are there to preserve this art form and make sure it's there for the next generations. Love to say, well, you know, opera's a dying art form.
They do indeed.
And so listen, they've been trying to kill opera for a long time. I don't think this is going to do it. And when I talk to people like you, I'm sure of it.
Thank you very much. I must say, I just wish I could reach out and hug you, Michael.
Me too. Me too.